When landlords let commercial properties, they tend to favour letting open plan premises. While this makes the property look bigger and, in theory at least, allows prospective tenants to imagine how the space could work for them, in practice this doesn't always provide the most suitable accommodation for running a business. For example, you might need to create individual offices, tea points, or even install that all-important £1 million machine that pumps out widgets. But in doing so, could you be lining up further problems down the line? I'm Tim Clark, a Director and Chartered Building Surveyor at Harrison Clark, and I'll be exploring some of the issues about making alterations to commercial premises. Whether or not you are allowed to make alterations to commercial premises will depend on what you have agreed with your landlord. Your lease might allow you to make certain types of alterations, but not others, and it might also require you to ask for permission as a condition of some types of alterations, or to give your landlord revised plans afterwards for permitted alterations. If you need to ask for landlord permission to make alterations, they might insist that you enter into a license to alter, which can sometimes come with a big bill from the solicitors documenting the change and from surveyors inspecting plans and the completed work. The alterations clause in a lease is probably the one with the widest variation as far as dilapidations is concerned, so don't expect there to be a standard answer to what type of alterations you can make. If you're in doubt about which type of alterations are allowed, you should consult a solicitor or a very competent dilapidations specialist surveyor. Changing a single word in alterations clauses can have a big impact on their meaning, and the devil, as always, is in the detail. The majority of the time, the making of alterations is not the only big cost that arises. Whenever you make alterations to a commercial property, you will more often than not need to budget for future work to remove the alterations and to return the building to its original condition. We call this process reinstatement. While some surveyors use the word alterations and reinstatement clauses interchangeably, in reality, they are very different and can sometimes be in two different places in your lease. Commonly, a reinstatement clause will be wrapped up in the yield up clause rather than the alterations clause. As with the alterations clause, there is a big variation in wording with reinstatement clauses. Some leases might require you to remove all alterations without exception. Some might require the landlord to serve notice at a specific time for you to have to reinstate. And recently, we've even seen some leases where a landlord can serve a notice to say that you must not reinstate particular items. Be careful of these types of reinstatement clause. How would you feel, for example, if you weren't allowed to take the £1 million widget machine with you because it has been too well annexed to the land? Nice profit for the landlord there. Beware too the difference between the wording all alterations and any alterations. Misunderstanding this could have big consequences, but that's probably an issue for another video in itself. If in doubt, speak to an experienced dilapidations surveyor. Recently, one issue that has arisen multiple times has been landlords asking tenants to reinstate alterations the tenant made years ago under previous lease agreements. This is often a big no-no as, unless the lease has been very specifically worded to require the tenant to remove alterations made under previous leases, these alterations become part of the demised premises. This is missed by solicitors more often than you might think when drafting new leases. If a landlord asks for this kind of work in a schedule of dilapidations, it can result in them declaring their intentions perhaps more specifically than they had intended, often leading to very strong supersession arguments in many cases. So landlord surveyors must make sure that they have read the lease very carefully and explained its implications to their client before making wide-ranging demands for reinstatement, which isn't always in the landlord's interest. If a lease has an obligation not to make alterations, but lacks an obligation to reinstate at lease end, in longer leases, the landlord's ability to require reinstatement or to collect damages from the tenant can expire after 12 years of making the alterations, as the making of alterations is effectively one and done rather than a continuing breach of the lease. Thus, the Limitation Act 1980 restricts the landlord's ability for taking action. Many surveyors miss this, don't let yours be one of them. In general, while chartered building surveyors are often expected to cover dilapidations issues, the reality is that there are relatively few true dilapidation specialists. So whether you're a landlord or a tenant, it will pay to have a true dilapidation specialist surveyor looking after your interests. If you are seeking advice on alterations made under a commercial lease or wider dilapidations advice, our specialist dilapidations team can be contacted on 02381 550051 and we'll be pleased to help.